Hi, and welcome to Filmmakers Compass Podcast, the show where we talk about movies and more movies. This is CP, and I got some good news for you and some bad news for you. Start the bad news. D-Man is not going to be on this show. But the good news is you get 2 times the CP. I know some of you are about ready to just stop right there, move on to the Joe Rogan show. That's fine. I didn't want to talk to you anyway. It's actually really ironic. D-Man and I actually managed to meet up earlier this week. I was going to meet with a producer friend out in Palm Springs. So I came up, he came over, we met kind of in the middle of both of us over there in Riverside before I took the trek out to the desert. And we talked about everything. And we did everything except record this show, which we planned on doing. So I am now doing it solo because our schedules have been a little all over the place. We haven't been able to meet up. So my apologize. And please DM D-Man because obviously his presence on this show is always missed. So in true D-Man fashion, let's get some of the shout outs out of the way. So first shout out to Anna C. Friend. This is one of our listeners from Brazil. She sent us an awesome comment commenting about the grief process and missing Carl Weathers. And all I can say is I totally agree. He is missed. And obviously, he was a great actor. And a lot of people are going to be feeling his loss. Second, Ivor. Now, in regards to the Ready Player One episode, he made a comment that he said he has not seen the movie, which I definitely recommend you watch it because it's not perfect, but it's Spielberg and he rarely truly disappoints. But Ivor goes on to say, it sounds like Spielberg is not a gamer, nor did he have one on the set. And all I have to say to that is I actually do know from friends who have worked with Spielberg in capacities, he's actually a huge gamer. Some people say he actually even loves video games more than he loves movies. And I actually think that may have been part of the problem with Ready Player One. He loved video games so much and was so immersed in the world and living out this fantasy of like the ultimate gaming experience in the Oasis that I wonder if in some ways maybe that hindered his critical judgment as a master of cinema, right? His love of gaming got in the way of his cinematic craft. That's just my theory. I don't know, but let me know your thoughts on Ivor. You should definitely get around to watching it when you get a chance. Next shout out is to Lori. I know you're living in Kansas City. They're having the parade. I know you told me that they canceled everyone's work downtown because it was going to be insane with the traffic. So I hope that you are, in fact, now back to being a Chiefs fan and decided to say, screw it. I'm going to go in and check out this massive party downtown as opposed to just hanging out at your house watching Friday Night Lights because, come on, let's be real. Go live it up. Your city just won a Super Bowl. I got a lot of feedback from a number of our listeners commenting on the internet exchange that's been going on regarding my comments about Barbie and how they were perceived by, well, a large portion of society. And listen, it's not like I wasn't doxxed or anything. It wasn't like a vicious attack. We just had a great conversation about people who love Barbie and me, who does not love Barbie. And then the last shout out is to my friend Whitney. Whitney, you commented on the video that I posted with my review of Argyle, and you asked, so it sucked? I mean, I'm not going to say it sucked. It didn't suck. It just was not the best film because it was lacking Henry Cavill. Come on. Oh, one more shout out. This is to our new listener, Courtney. Thank you for checking out the show. I wish D-Man was here so I could tell him the story you sent me. So maybe we'll save that for next week. But her and I go way back. She knew me back when I was a kid in the Midwest. So thank you for checking out the show, and I hope you definitely enjoy it. So now it's time for our box office breakdown. when we look at the box office from this past weekend, things haven't really changed as much as I think people expected them to. The number 3 movie in America is still The Beekeeper. Wonka is actually still hanging on there. It's the 4th best, and Migration is the 5th best. So those really haven't changed. But the number 2 movie is a newly released film. It came out last Friday, and that is the film Lisa Frankenstein. Now, I have not seen this. It is on my list of movies to catch. Alyssa did message me and say that it was a great time and she really enjoyed the film. So thank you, Alyssa. I'll have to check it out, and I'll obviously post my reviews when I get to it. And then the number 1 movie in America is still the film Argylle. So despite the bad press, despite the weak opening weekend and the apparent lack of Henry Cavill, this movie is still the number 1 movie in America. So don't sleep on it if you're thinking about sleeping on it. Now, I know some people have messaged me and said that they really hated it themselves. Other people really enjoyed it, but still leading the box office, so that's got to count for something. Now, let's shift to the worldwide box office. This is a little interesting. Again, The Beekeeper is still at number 1. It's still going strong. It's made it close to $135 million worldwide, with actually almost 60% of that coming from the international market. Mean Girls is in the number 2 position, and that's made close to 100 million. But unlike The Beekeeper, only 30% of that is international. So this movie is really making all its money domestically. Argylle has moved up to the number 3 spot, breaking even about 50% of the market international, 50% of the market of the audience domestically. And again, it's topping 60 million. And Night Swim is in number 4. Now, the number 5 movie in the global box office, this is actually really interesting. Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Freedom. So this is a cinematic film from the Mobile Suit Gundam series, specifically the Seed universe. And it's made about $15 million, all of it in Japan. And obviously, I'm a huge nerd, and I love these shows. So I can't wait till that comes to America, because I will happily give Bandai my money for another Gundam film. Let's get into our pop culture minute. Now, unless you were living under a rock, you know that something very big happened this past weekend, and that would be the Super Bowl. So, obviously, this is a show about movies. This is not a show about football. But I'll drop some spoilers. If you were not paying attention, the Kansas City Chiefs won. They beat the 49ers. I was actually very thrilled about that, because I was rooting for the Kansas City Chiefs. If you were rooting for the 49ers, then I'm sorry, you just made a bad choice and you were wrong. Why would you, why would you, if you have any sort of brain in your head, why would you be rooting against Taylor Swift? I mean, let's just think about that. But so I was happy with the outcome of the game. I know many people weren't, and well, I'm sorry to hear that. But let's kind of get into this. So it was broadcast on CBS. Now, you may or may not know this. CBS actually used 165 cameras to capture the game. They actually included a couple 360 videos, some cameras designed specifically for VR and AR. So this was really a Super Bowl looking at the technology of the future. When we look at the streaming, the viewership numbers, 122 million people watch this Super Bowl. So that is huge. I'm guessing, whether you like her or not, a big reason for that is Taylor herself, who is credited with actually increasing the viewership of the NFL over this past season. But I thought that CBS actually did something really interesting. They did a simulcast of the show, which was geared at children. It was on Nickelodeon, and the game was called by Patrick Star and SpongeBob. So I'm really bummed I did not watch that version, but how could you not love listening to SpongeBob and Patrick call the Super Bowl? I did see that alone garnered about 1.5 million views. So that's kind of cool. I'm interested to see if something like that continues with essentially different casts of the game geared towards different audiences. I think that that's a really, really interesting thing they tried. Now, it was in Vegas. Obviously, it seemed like everyone had a lot of fun. We got some great stories. But as viewers, I want to take a second and talk to you about commercials. I heard a 30-second spot was going for about $7 million, which they say is kind of on par for what was expected. But what were some of your favorite commercials? There were a couple that I really liked. I liked the Arnold State Farm one, where we, of course, were bagging on Arnold for his ability to speak English in the way that the rest of us do because of his Austrian accent. I thought that was a lot of fun. I loved the Matt Damon and Ben Affleck Dunkin's commercial. That was great. I liked the Bet MGM commercial that was bagging on Tom Brady for winning too much because I just hate Tom Brady. So I never have a problem bagging on that guy. And yeah, I think that was probably the ones that I enjoyed the most. But how about you? I mean, what were the ones that stood out to you? What were the ones that stood apart? A lot of people were talking about the Robert Kennedy Jr. presidential campaign. I think they were, well, apparently some people didn't know that he was actually running for president, but a lot of people were kind of surprised by the old school nature of the ad. It was straight out of the 60s. And a lot of people have kind of forgot that that's how we used to campaign for president. It wasn't this, hey, this guy's evil and he's going to kill us all, or this other guy's evil and going to kill us all. It was just, hey, vote for this guy because he's great. So I thought that was an interesting choice. Obviously, Robert Kennedy caught a lot of flack on social media for it. Apparently, his team did not actually run it. It was run by a super PAC, and apparently, people on all sides were gunning for the man. But needless to say, those were the highlights that I had from the actual commercial side of the game. As far as the game itself, some people said it was really slow. I mean, it was, but we got the first Super Bowl with overtime under the new overtime rules. That was fun. And I was kind of impressed because at the end of the day, the team I wanted to win won, and we didn't see nearly as much Taylor Swift as I think we were all expecting to. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts. So since D-Man is not on this show, I wanted to take this as an opportunity to do a little bit of what we would call movie remake time. The two films that I want to compare, and again, I'm doing this because D-Man did not see it, are the original Mean Girls film from 2004 and the recent Mean Girls musical film from 2024. I have a lot of strong feelings about these films. As you know, I think that the 2004 Mean Girls movie, directed by Mark Waters, is one of the greatest movies of all time. I'm not ashamed to say that. I don't think it's too bold of a statement. I think it is brilliantly written by Tina Fey. I think the casting is phenomenal. And it still is incredibly funny. And what's even better is it actually has some things to say about life as a teenager, growing up, and society at large. So I think there's a lot packed away into this coming of age teen comedy. So I was a little shocked when I saw that it was being remade. I mean, it was almost 20 years exactly. I mean, we're talking like 4 months short of 20 years exactly that the new version of the film was coming out. That seems a little weird. Also, the film is not a direct remake of Mean Girls. It is a remake of the Mean Girls stage performance. Now, this really confuses me. Typically, we take musicals that are performed on the stage with the all the amazing qualities and all the limitations of giving a live stage performance, and we convert them to film with the pros and cons that come with releasing them in a new form of media cinematically, right? Now, we've seen a few times where we take a film and convert it into a stage play. We turn it into a musical. We allow actors to perform it live. It's slightly different, but again, it is presented in a new way. So I'm just confused why we would take a film, turn it into a musical, and then turn it back into a film when we already had a film. And that film is freaking amazing. I think the other thing that's a little weird is, and my numbers are going to be slightly off, I thought that Mean Girls premiered on Broadway around like 2015, maybe even later than that, because I heard that the initial Broadway run was cut short because of COVID. So it really hasn't actually been on stage for that long before they converted it back to film for the theaters. And I mean, when you compare it to something like, the original Phantom of the Opera, I think Phantom of the Opera premiered on Broadway about 20 years before Schumacher's version of the film was released in theaters. So it also seems weird because it hasn't actually been on the stage for that long for it to then have this massive demand for its return to cinemas. So that's my first issue with it. Now, I'll be totally transparent. I've never seen Mean Girls on Broadway. I have not seen the stage performance. Friends who have tell me that they absolutely love it. They say it's really good. But my understanding is the cinematic version of the film actually cuts about half the musical numbers, which seems like a ton for, if we're viewing this in the version based on the stage play. So I didn't know why they cut out so many songs, but I can't attest to that because I haven't seen it on the stage. So really what I want to talk about are some of the major differences between the original film and the new film. And unfortunately, the first issue that I have is the story. And I feel like if you went to see Mean Girls in 2024 without seeing the original Mean Girls, you would be confused because there are significant gaps in the storytelling that do not translate in the new film. And part of that is because in order to make time for musical numbers, we have to cut segments of the story. Like, unfortunately, that's just going from one version of the film to another version. But I think the bigger issue is the original film is so dependent on the narration of Lindsay Lohan's character, Katie Haring. And in the absence of Katie's narration, there are missing chunks. And Mean Girls actually plays itself as kind of almost different segments in the life of high schoolers in this one year. Yet Katie's narration in the first one ties it all together. We understand what she's thinking. We understand why her and her friends are doing things. We understand the motivation behind the plastics. It also adds a great level of comedy. And at the end of the film, we actually experience Katie's remorse. So not only do we not have her remorse at the end of the film for changing into the thing that she initially despised, but the segments don't align together in the same way that they do in the original film. So you really have to know the Mean Girls film from 2004 before you can see the musical in the 2024 version, because if you didn't, the movie just wouldn't make sense to you. It relies on your knowledge, your pre-existing knowledge as a viewer of knowing the story to connect the pieces yourself. And I think that that's a colossal failure for a film. I understand it's a remake, but it needs to be solely contained within its own universe. And I think that that's a problem. The other major problem that I have is actually from a storytelling perspective. So the original story in Mean Girls, if you remember in 2004, and it's actually wrapped up in this great joke that I think a lot of people don't realize. So one of the last lines in the film, when Kevin Napor dances with Janice, he asks her what her nationality is, and she says she's Lebanese. And so this is really a joke that is like a meta joke for the whole film that I find very, very clever. So Janice Ian is Lebanese. Regina George doesn't know the difference between Lebanese and lesbian. So Regina starts a rumor that Janice is in fact a lesbian, but she's Lebanese, which goes on to destroy Janice Ian's entire life. So much so that she leaves school, she comes back later as a totally different person. Her social life has been destroyed, all because Regina's an idiot and starts spreading rumors. And that's actually very in line with the message of Mean Girls in terms of the damage that rumors do, the damage that when people pretend to be something they're not, when people aren't honest with one another and talk about people behind their back, right? That's what the film's about. So unfortunately, that cleverness, but more importantly, that message is destroyed in the 2000 version of the film. Again, when we watched Regina in the original 2004 version, she's kind of a bitch. Sad but true. She's super mean. She victimizes everybody around her. She destroys people's lives. As Janice says, she is a life ruiner. She ruins lives. And she ruins Janice Ian's life by manufacturing a rumor. In the 2024 version of the film, though, that's not really the case. Instead, the story rests around what I just think is a missed opportunity. Janice lights Regina's backpack on fire. It's kind of an unintentional thing, but she does light her backpack on fire. And so Regina spreads a rumor around the school that Janice is a crazed pyromaniac. But the difference is Janice lit Regina's backpack on fire. Kind of a bitch move yourself. So I think that the spiral for Janice's life being thrown out of control beyond her means and the rumors that spread as a result of things she had no part in is not as powerful because she did take action. Maybe the intention and the effect and the results of that are misconstrued by the high school rumor mill, but she did do something which directly led to the social consequences that she faced as an outsider. I just don't think that's as powerful as in the first one. Another major problem I have with the Mean Girls film is, unfortunately, the first film is just cast incredibly well. The actors are amazing. The performances are memorable. And no offense to the new actors, but you are directly portraying characters that were portrayed before. Most of them in ways almost identical to the portrayal in the first time around. And it's just not as powerful for me. I will think that the one exception, I thought the character of Damien is hilarious, which he's hilarious in the first one, and he really shines in the new version of him in this film where he's slightly different, the way they write him. But again, I've heard from people who saw it on the film, they say that, or on the stage, they say that the stage portrayal of Damien is even better in the stage version than in of the musical than in the cinematic version of the musical. So again, kind of a disservice. But I mean, it even gets to the point that when we look at characters like the rest of the plastics and in terms of Karen and Gretchen, they're almost insignificant in this film. We could have cut Karen and Gretchen completely from this movie, and I don't think that it would have added or subtracted anything from the film, which to me is not a good sign because characters who don't need to be there probably shouldn't be there. And I think that's a huge disservice because both of them in the first one are not just memorable and iconic and hilarious additions to the film, but they actually do serve roles that help to propel events forward. The failure with casting continues to the point that we have Tina Fey again reprising her role as Katie Herring's teacher, Miss Norbury. And Tim Meadows returns as the school principal. So they are directly competing against performances they already gave in the past. And they're just not as good. They really aren't. It's unfortunate. They're not quite as funny. They're a little older. And they don't bring the charm and believability that they brought the first time around. But that kind of reminds me of another failure of the film, which is when you look at the writing. I think that the first Mean Girls movie is one of the funniest movie ever made. Every line is hilarious. Now, I know we live in a different time and jokes from 20 years ago don't fly as well as they used to. But unfortunately, in an attempt to make Mean Girls politically correct, it came at the expense of the jokes. And a lot of the really great lines from the first one just don't deliver in the same way that they did. Or even more, there were elements in the film that were changed to apply to modern audiences. And I don't think that those were as funny. One of the best examples I'll give you is this. In the original film, when Kevin comes up to Katie and he introduces himself, he gives her his business card. You know, it says Kevin Napor, mathlete / badass MC. And I still find that line hilarious because, I mean, of course Kevin would think he's a badass MC. But in the new version, Kevin goes up to Katie, he gives her his business card, and it says mathlete / public figure. Now, I know that that is a nod towards the TikTok influencer generation, but I just don't find that quite as funny as some dude who really is not a badass MC, but thinks he is, versus a wannabe influencer. So that's what I mean in the sense that I just think some of the jokes were weaker this time around than the first time. So when we look at the soundtrack, I understand that the new 2024 version of the film is in fact a musical. And I'm not familiar with the songs from the stage performance. But it does come at the expense of the 2004 movie soundtrack, which I think is incredible. In fact, if you remember, one of the last episodes I recorded, last solo episodes I recorded, when I did an episode about movie soundtracks, I listed the Mean Girls soundtrack as one of my favorite. I think it's a very iconic soundtrack. It has a great style that complements the movie. And it's so iconic that there are scenes and you know exactly the song that's about to cut in right before it does, right? And this version of the film did not have that. And I felt like it was missing. I like the kind of punk rock girl soundtrack from the first one. And knowing scenes that are coming up in the movie, right? We're about to go to the Halloween party. We're about to go to the school dance. I found myself wanting that original soundtrack more than the musical soundtrack written for the film. Now, I don't think that that's necessarily a failure of the movie. That's just a personal preference. I just didn't like the musical numbers as much as the original punk rock soundtrack. So that's all me. That has nothing to do with the film. That shouldn't be a reason why you don't go see the film. And the last thing is there were some great nods to the original movie, some great ones. There's some incredible Easter eggs. You know, one of my favorites is there's actually a girl at the Halloween party who is dressed like Regina is dressed in the 2004 version of the film. If you remember, after at gym class, they cut the holes in her t-shirt so you can see her purple bra underneath, and Regina puts it on as like, whatever. And she starts a new fashion trend and everybody starts cutting holes in their shirt so you can see their bra. There's actually a girl at the Halloween party that is wearing the white shirt with the purple bra underneath and has the cutout. So I thought that was funny. There's some other really cool nods to the original. To save you from the spoilers, there is one other character from the original film who does make a cameo appearance. I was kind of disappointed. I was hoping that we were going to see more folks other than this character, Tina Fey and Tim Meadows, because the rest of the cast is still around. And more importantly, we saw a Walmart Black Friday commercial 3 months ago that had almost the entire original cast reprising their roles from Mean Girls, and it was hilarious. In fact, that's probably a better remake of Mean Girls, the Walmart commercial, than the 2024 movie, in my opinion, because it stays in line with the spirit of the first so well, and it recaptures that magic. I guess in closing, my thoughts would be this. I love the original Mean Girls. And I obviously went opening day because I had to go opening day. This is my favorite movie. Of course, I'm going to see the remake version. I didn't have high expectations, and I was severely disappointed. It just didn't hold up in the same way. Now, I don't know if younger people find this one to be more appealing. But most of the people I've talked to say, they like it. But I think the general consensus is the original is the better one, at least from the people I've talked to. So you let me know your thoughts. Have you seen the new Mean Girls film? And what did you think? Did you like it better than the original? And have you seen the stage play? And how does that affect your perspective on the Mean Girls films? I know there's a lot of hardcore Renee Rapp fans. I know she performed it originally on Broadway, and people loved seeing her back in the film in this version. She's not a bad Regina, but I mean, come on. Rachel McAdams as Regina George is probably one of my favorite teenage movie villains of all time. And I was a little bummed that Renee Rapp didn't seem to be quite so evil and vicious and backstabbing. So I'm going to wrap it there. As I'm sure you are all aware, these solo episodes get a little exhausting when I don't have anyone else to talk to. So I'm going to wrap it there. Let me know your thoughts. Did you see Mean Girls? Did you like it? What did you think? I'm actually really curious. Has anyone out there not seen the 2004 version of the film? Because that would be quite entertaining. Thanks for listening to the show. Obviously, you can find all our episodes online at our website, filmmakerscompass.com. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and you can connect with us on social at Film Comp Podcast, because we're Filmmakers Compass Podcast. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can find me at NDCal5. You can find D-Man at Big Kid D-Man. And that's it. That's this show. Thanks for hanging out and talking movies with us this week. We will see you back here next week. Until then, keep watching your movies.